topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Good morning, listeners. It's Tuesday, and great to be here with you. So thank you to all of you who have got our books, especially the new book on the artificial intelligence, because so many of my clients requested that I put it out there, given so many changes that are happening and how to navigate this era of AI. So do get a copy of yours and leave us your review and any questions you may have. So today, we have a very special guest, and we'll be going into leadership and the age-old questions as to how you can remain authentic and shine in face of difficulties. So welcome, Kelly.
Thank you so much for having me, Divya.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you. So wonderful audience, Kelly McGinnis is president at Thermo Fisher Scientific, leading biopharma business. So she brings a wealth of knowledge and wealth of experience to us. So Kelly, share with us as to when so many times at the level where you're at, so many things feel urgent at a time. How do you decide what actually deserves your attention and what's just noise?
Yeah. So the thing I always say is urgent and important are not the same thing. And urgency feels like a spiral of everything all at once. And it always feels like something asked of you. The things that are important are actually things, it's usually less than 5. And my rule is 5. There's never more than 5 things that are important at the same time. And if you don't distinguish one from the other, then you're just going to end up swirling. I always picture like a tumbleweed, like tumbling in the plains, because you don't really know what direction you're going to end up in. And so what I do very religiously is at the beginning, I'm a morning person. Everyone will have to do this differently. But every single morning at 5 a.m., I decide what 5 things are important that day. And they need to be in the context of the 5 things that I think are important for the week, for the month, for the year. And if you sense any discrepancy or inconsistency, I reassess. But if you don't do that every single day, and also I do it for about 2 hours every Friday, then you end up just, going all over the place. And those things are not just work things, they're also personal things, because there's no such thing as separation in my mind. You've got to put these important things in one plane and assess them at any given time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're right on the mark. And having that little discipline, having that little time to prioritize things is super important, because when you are looking at urgent important matrix, which was put out, the Eisenhower matrix, it has been put out forever, but it's that distinction that makes the difference. Yeah. So initially, when you started out your career, did you have any aspirations as to which direction it would take?
Oof. When I first started, so I graduated college, it was right post .com bust, right before financial crisis. So if you put your headset back to that time, it was not a frothy market. It was not one where people were taking these big risks. And my major was entrepreneurship. So put me back then where I'm like, okay, all I want to do in life is create a new business and build and grow these big things on the backdrop of that timing. And it's misaligned. And so what I ultimately decided to do, which I've been quite successful in over the years, is how do I bring that entrepreneurial spirit into the context of bigger corporations? Because many people think they're mutually exclusive. I mean, I fundamentally believe they're not mutually exclusive if you do it the right way. And so while my dream was ultimately start my own thing, what I have done over the years is how do I create that spirit and that growth mindset and the transformative mindset in the context of something bigger?
So what I'm hearing, Kelly, is that you brought entrepreneurship to your job.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And when you merge the two things together, because so many times what happens is that, oh, I'm not in a meaningful job. Several of my clients, including executives and down to the young Gen Z, they're like, oh, that next shiny thing, the next best thing. So there's such a difference in that mindset versus you are, yep, I'm going to bring this and apply it to my job. How did you make that transition?
So I think some of it is just how I'm personally wired. I'm a disruptor by nature. I like to disrupt things. I'm also comfortable with getting in trouble once in a while, not for big things, not for things that are black and white, but for things that have like, I tried something and it didn't work. I tried something and that didn't work, but I pivoted and I made it work. So I always tell people, if you're afraid of making a mistake or afraid of getting in trouble for something or afraid of anything else in these bigger companies, then that entrepreneurial mindset to do something different will be so stifled you won't do it. And so what I'm not talking about is doing like big things, but things like, let me try this, or let me invest my budget here instead of here, or let me change this whole process to see how it works. If you do those things consistently, you can become fundamentally an entrepreneur in the confines of a bigger company. If you're afraid of those things and you're afraid of just having a tough conversation with your boss or whatever, it becomes much harder. So to me, it's a bit of a mindset shift as well.
Mm-hmm. And here's the thing, right? It's important that we look at it because there's a moment in lives where strategy, pressure, real life, so many times they will collide.
Yes.
And no one really prepares you for it. And it's important to have that growth mindset so you're able to kind of like, work through it.
Absolutely.
So given that you've been in the corporate leadership, tell us, what are some of the things that leadership gets wrong?
Yeah. One of the biggest things I observe, and I have observed, I've been in 3 companies, is we get so much vested in our experience. And so on the one side, experience and pattern recognition is super, super helpful, really helpful. Mine is super helpful too, but only if I don't let that be the only thing that drives me. And so what do I mean by that? If I'm not consistently curious about things that even with my experience seem impossible, if I'm not curious about asking people about it or letting them push back, I will consistently make decisions only based on historical information versus what could be true in the future. And I think AI is actually, it's going to be the great, I mean, I'm of 2 thoughts. It can be a great equalizer. It can also be a great divide, making the best even better and making the weakest even weaker. But that's a perfect example of you cannot replay how the past worked because it's just not going to work that way. And so that curiosity needs to override the experience. And you can still choose the decision based on your experience because they need to coalesce, but it can't be the only thing. And I think what some leaders get wrong is they instantly know, I need to go do this because I saw this 10 years ago, or I saw this 5 years ago, or 3 years ago, whatever. That's not going to work in the future.
So basically, what I'm hearing is that bring your own emotional intelligence. Yes, this was the past experience. Yes, these are the things. Taking a pause, stepping back and looking at things, that what's the optimal path over here? What's my objective? Where am I going?
Absolutely.
So now, given that, you said something that I believe in as well, that AI will make stronger, more bolder, and more stronger,
Yeah.
and expose or mirror the weaknesses because
Yes.
it's how we interact with it.
Yes.
So, would love to hear your take on that in depth.
Yeah. So perfect example. So I am a super curious person. And so I actually don't depend on my team to learn things for me. I'm a big believer that you actually need to learn some things yourself. So I play around with all of the different AI related tools. Now, my latest obsession is Claude Cowork. And so when you go into that and you just realize what it can do, it is mind blowing. Like, so it's making me, it doesn't know all the answers. It doesn't. So if anyone who expects it to know all the answers is wrong, but because I'm training it with what I know and more data and more case studies and more this and more that, it's getting smarter and my decisions are getting better. And there's plenty of people in my peer group and then also on my team that the most that they've interacted with AI so far is simply like a Google chat and chat GPT. That's never going to take them to the next level. And I can't decide whether it's a lack of curiosity or just a lack of belief that we are in this moment where everything's about to change. But either way, that type of person is going to get substantially weaker in contrast to all the people that do the things that I was experiencing, like obsessing with Claude Cowork. Thing's amazing, by the way, but like really obsessing about it and getting better and training it and just the things that it can do is amazing. But it is going to create this divide.
Absolutely. And you're right on that because Claude Cowork is fascinating. I've been playing around with it too for some time. And one of the things you said that not sure whether it's the belief.
Yeah.
So just to add a little bit quickly, and we'll come back to your topic, is that there are several stages to AI adoption.
Mhm.
And it's no different than any other technology that humans have experienced.
Yeah.
Because as I'm helping my clients and as I'm helping my leaders, executives to adapt it, people have to go through that. And one of the things that you mentioned was very important over here that we highlight is that it's not a magical solution.
Yeah.
What you give it
Yeah.
that's what it's going to spit out, how you train it. And that's where that metacognitive thinking, bringing in the reflexive thinking, when you're interacting with it is super, super important because that's what's going to distinguish you.
Yes.
So those skills that were not highlighted before, now they're going to be exposed more. So it's very good. And then we talk about, this brings us to trust because so many people don't trust AI.
Yeah.
So especially when leaders are at the helm of the ship, what do you think builds trust but actually does the opposite, especially in times of AI?
Yeah. So I think the answer is just made worse with AI, but it's been true forever, which is the leaders that don't show any vulnerability. And so what I'm not is afraid of AI, but what I don't know is what does everybody's work look like 2 years from now, 1 year from now, 2 years from now, 10 years from now? I don't know the answer. And so I just need to say, I don't know the answer. We got to figure it out. Here's what we know it can do. Here's what we think it can do. And then if we were to define the horizon 5 years and work backwards, what does that look like? So that goes back to you gotta show, like, leaders who show or think they know everything are completely distrustworthy. I mean, they just are. Like, you have to be able to say, I don't know certain things. So of course, not one leader on the planet, even the CEOs that run these companies, know exactly what things are going to look like 10 years from now. And so anybody that says with definitive straightness, and I've heard it, AI is not going to change jobs. AI is not going to eliminate jobs. Like, you cannot say things like that to people. You actually have to say, here's what I know, here's what I don't know, and then here's where we go from there. It's the conviction and the clarity of path versus the absolute knowledge about everything.
Love that. And that is super, like, that is, you have just went straight and addressed the matter at the heart, because every 20 seconds there's a change. There was Sora yesterday, AI took away Sora today.
Yeah.
So it is the backbone, it's the skeleton that's going to uphold as to the different layers that we put on it. And that's very powerful. So during these times, people are experiencing emotional exhaustion, and there is a lot of confusion because, as you mentioned, people are making predictions. Oh, 5 years from now, 1 year from now, we can predict what's going to be 1 month from now. So during these times, like, if you had to put your finger on, what do you think is making that trust between leadership and employees break? Is it emotional exhaustion, strategic confusion, or something else?
I think it's both. So here's what I'm observing, and I have lots of friends who lead big places in other companies and also work for leaders. You see two types of leaders in this environment. You see the ones that pretend to have extreme levels of certainty and strategy and path, and then they keep it that way forever. And then you've got the leaders that don't. And they're actually both wrong, because, and this goes back to my prior point, because in this day and age, especially with all of the different predictions, and AI is different every week, if something's different every single week. And so if you get, my dog does this, if you get into like chase the squirrel mentality of like squirrel, 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 you will go nuts. Like, you cannot do that. You have to have a directional view of where we need to go and why, right? Big business strategy. But the how, which is via AI really just becomes a horizontal to said business strategy. And you have to be willing to change your mind. So some leaders, I think, get so so bored down in this specific thing is my strategy. I wrote it down 5 years ago and I need to just execute it. Otherwise, someone will think I didn't know what I was talking about. These strategies need to change, evolve in the how. A year, I mean, most companies do this every year. That's not frequent enough. You need to actually look at this every quarter to say, is this still the right path? And I don't think a lot of leaders do that today.
Mm-hmm. No, that is very critical, and it's important to think about it. And that's where critical thinking, emotional intelligence steps in. Now, what happens is that there is this understanding or assumption that people in leadership know where they're going, but as you said, they don't. So what are some of the other things about leadership at your level or C-suite that most people completely misunderstand?
Yeah. My other favorite is many leaders assume that everybody is wired like them, and they're not. And my favorite, there's all sorts of different, as you know, different measurement and skill types to assess what type you are. My favorite is the Enneagram. I think it does it the best. But what it effectively does is type you into these 9 different types and maps how you interact with other people. And I use it religiously with every team. Why do I do that? Because I am squarely framed as an 8. It means it's a challenger. And the funny vignette about this I love is there are two 8s that are famous. And again, this isn't confirmed, but a lot of psychologists think this is true. Nelson Mandela and Donald Trump. And so I laugh when I say that, because every type, when it's at its best, behaves a certain way. And when it's at its not best, it comes off another way. And so you actually need to understand yourself super, super deeply before you can lead people. And then step 2 is actually understand how people take information, how they decide, how they like to be coached, because if you don't do that, you cannot lead an effective team. And I think a lot of leaders just don't spend the time on it.
Mm-hmm. And that is something that's important for a leader to sit down and think about. How am I going to lead? How am I going to own the team? How am I going to bring people in the fold? So many times what happens is that leadership may not have enough time. A lot of people want to get in front of them. So let's say somebody is promoted. Now they have to provide quick updates and create decks for the leadership team. What are some of the ways a new senior VP or a leader like that can become visible without encroaching too much on the leadership's time?
Yeah. So I think from that perspective, it's bring something helpful. And often said helpful thing is context. The C-suite leaders are not going to know everything, thankfully, because that's not their job. So when you have the layer of the SVPs and the VPs, bringing the context and the clarity is super, super important. I always say this to people, even directors going up to VPs. It's your job is not to make, your job at its core is to eliminate or reduce ambiguity for your boss. It is not to give them as more data and more stuff to analyze themselves. Your job is to reduce the ambiguity for them, which means you actually, I always give this perfect example. I did this myself. So it's self-incriminating here. When I first got promoted to VP, and I was moving kind of in the senior executive director or director to VP. To impress my boss, who was, the president of the business at the time, I sent him like pages of decks and my analysis and data, and my recommendation was hidden like on page 5 somewhere. Horrible. That is a horrible way to interact with someone who actually hired me and promoted me to reduce ambiguity. And so I think that is something not everybody gets right the first few times.
And women are moving up really, really fast. We are seeing more and more women in leadership positions, and yet there is some gap that's going to take time. And what would you say are 2 to 3 things that you faced and overcame that our audience can learn from?
Yeah. So I've been promoted pretty fast over the years. I've been in the workforce 23 years now. And even now, which is amazing because it still doesn't die, I always get assumptions. If someone doesn't know me and I'm, meeting investors for the first time, or I'm meeting a big customer for the first time, their immediate assumption is that I'm some more junior person there to, facilitate or not necessarily take notes, but make sure smooth running of the meeting. Okay, why is that? Because that's the bias we've existed in for the last million years, and it still exists to a certain point. So what I always try to do is make that first impression very, very good. Women don't often have another opportunity for a first impression, especially if you've been promoted a little fast, if you look a little younger, if you're whatever the said context of that is. Everybody's got their biases. And so that first impression I really invest in. And so that means I ask smart questions. I sit at the table. I come prepared. I know the client in and out. I know the fund in and out. I know the investor in and out. Because more than men even, and it's also important for men, don't get me wrong, but that is super important for women. So I would say that is something do not underestimate. It's important. The other thing that is actually a strength of women that we need to actually play up versus play down is women tend to be, and there's all sorts of studies on this, tend to be more EQ focused and EQ mature than our male counterparts, which means our ability to read the room, to anticipate how someone's going to behave, to anticipate who's going to have issues with each other, to anticipate when you read a room, I can anticipate am I going to get through my 3 points, or is there too much emotional tension between these people to get what I need done? And I pivot in the moment. Women can do that really, really well. Do it, because that's going to differentiate. And then the third thing, which, I grew up with everybody telling me not to do this, but I lean into my personal life, meaning, my team and people know I've got a young son, he's 3, and I've got a husband, and because why do I do that? One, I like to have more interpersonal relationship, but also for women, if people understand you and your context and this and that, we will not get taxed for having the harsher discussion. Meaning, so what happens if I were to just have a harsh, if I have to give harsh feedback, or I have to stand up and say something, if I have to defend myself, whatever. If I just do that without the emotional context behind it, as women, we will get labeled as difficult or hard to work with, or any of the other adjectives that come with that. But if you invest in the personal relationship, that doesn't happen nearly as much. And so those would be, I think, the 3 things that I would say for women.
Yeah, no. Being a woman, I've experienced that. And I've also seen a lot of my women clients share that. And providing that context is so critical, because it's important. And talking about those things and being aware of it can make life simpler. And based on, what you talked about leaning in. So do you recall a time when you leaned in, especially when others were pushing back on your idea, and yet you moved through it, you were able to bring in the buy-in, and then it ended up being the right move?
Yeah, absolutely. So the most recent examples, we were acquiring a very large, very culturally different company that we spent $20+ billion on. And I was at the time going to be the CFO and strategy lead to make sure that the deal integrated well, that we drove the right level of revenue synergies, and we brought the culture along. And when you spend that much on an acquisition, it has to go well. There is no failure point. Otherwise, we got huge problems. And so I was brought in to make sure that worked well. And I was getting a lot of pressure at the time to fully integrate this business into the corporate hierarchy. So same systems, same HR policies, same approval mechanisms, same everything. And I knew that was the wrong decision. I knew, because it was a completely different type of business, completely different type of people organization, different culture. It's a people-oriented business versus the more core technology businesses. And so I stood up and said, here's what we cannot do, because if we do, we will break the business. And at the time I got told no 3 or 4 times, but I stood up, I stood up for it, and we did it the way that I said to, and it was hugely successful. But I know in my core, if we did it the full integrate way, we would have lost tons of people. We would have broken the business. And the thing that made the business good in the first place would have died a slow death in that infrastructure. And so I always tell people, if you know and it's worth it, you got to push. If it's just, there are things that I think that I will not push back on, even if I wouldn't do it that way, because it's not that important. Like, you cannot die on every hill. But if it's something that is extremely important, you've got to raise your hand and stand up. But you got to know the difference. And that's where we started. What is important versus what's not. Because if you don't know that, all of these other leadership subchapters we're talking about don't work. I mean, I fully believe that.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And as you talked about, you knew which battle to pick, and you went after it. So could you highlight 1 or 2 obstacles that came up for you during this journey, and how did you overcome them?
Oh, yeah. So from the more junior people to the senior most people, I got lots of questions like, well, that's not, or statements like, that's just not how we do it. And what do you mean you get to make how do you get to make the decision if, so-and-so said this, and well, if we don't do this, then this is going to be the cost. Every reason. I mean, I during that period, I think I had to be in like 12 different meetings telling people we're just not going to do it. And here's why. And I wasn't like obstinate without facts, but I had a very clear view of here's why it won't work. And let's try this instead. And if this doesn't work, or we see, you know, a negative cost outcome in the banner of plus or minus 3%, then that's fine. Then we can do something different, but we got to try it. And it was, I always say, when you grow up in a company and you've spent your entire career in said company, which I hadn't in this particular example, which gave me the unique ability to not get so mired in the detail or stuck in the mud, so to speak, on how things have always been done. And I think that is the thing that made me have the context to know in my core that we couldn't do that full integration.
Mm-hmm. And you had said about clarity and conviction, and that's what's coming through for me.
Yeah.
That you had the conviction and you stood fast. I'm curious if you had moments of doubts during this journey.
Yeah.
And if yes, how did you deal with them?
Yeah, because I think it's impossible if you feel so sure about something, yet everybody around you is telling you you're wrong. You're going to start to have doubts. It's human nature. And at the time I was doing this, I had been in the company only like a year and a half. It wasn't a lot of time. And so I wasn't this very well-known leadership person in this company. I was relatively new. And so I knew also at the time is if I pushed this hard and I did this and I held my ground and I was wrong, I would be doing reputational damage to myself most likely. Because I was really, this one was one I was going to die on the hill for. And I was willing to do it anyway. But that's what made me keep being successful in this company. That store was promoted like 4 different times in 5 years because if you really want to get promoted that fast, you're going to be taking bets and you could be wrong. And if you're wrong, there may be consequences. But when someone asks me, well, how do you actually figure out a way to do that? Is I'm willing, if it doesn't work, to face the consequence of it. And I don't think everybody is.
Yeah. And that's the tug of war people go through.
Yeah.
What if,
Yeah.
rather than coming back to that, I have the conviction because I'm ready to draw a line in the sand.
Yeah.
When you do that, that's what's going to differentiate you from others. And that's what's going to also help you climb the ladder and allowing yourself that room to fail. And
Yes.
so many times what happens is that fear of failure births mediocrity and does not allow you to rise.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So given that you're a mom, what would you say are some of the things? So many times women are scared, like, I'll be going on maternity leave and they're even scared to use full 6 months or 3 months, whatever the company offers.
Yeah.
They're scared, like, oh, I will not be caught up.
Yeah.
What would you say to those young moms or even older moms, doesn't matter, like wherever they're at, like, whatever age their children are.
Yeah.
When they're coming back from that maternity leave, what could they do that it does not get them to start from ground zero? Because those doubts can really eat you up.
Oh gosh. Yes. And they did me too. So I took the company provided maternity leave. At the time I was deciding whether I should just take a little more too, because we had set ourselves up. I could take a little more as well, even though it would have been unpaid. And I chose not to only take the company provided, not for financial reasons, because I was scared. I was really scared. If I just take more, will I become irrelevant? Will I this? Will I that? Looking back now, that was almost 3 years ago. I should have done it because 1, you don't get that time back. But 2, what happened when I came back is they offered me a promotion. Why did that happen? Because before I went on maternity leave, I organized who was going to do what, who's responsible for what, who owns what decision rights are they, what are we going to get done in this period. I set everything up. It's just what I do. I'm super organized. And so I set it up. When I got back, everything was completely fine. It was great. Everything happened exactly the way that I had designed it. And so all thinking back, if I had just taken more time out and just run that out a little more, the team would have been fine. And the other thing I tell women, especially women leaders, is, and I tell this to men too, so it's everybody. If the team cannot survive without you for a few months, you didn't build a sufficient team. You built a dependent team. And so from that perspective, my fear was there because I think it's impossible for high achieving women not to be fearful. But I would have been fine. And even because of the team was able to execute on the goals that I aligned, I was offered a promotion like the day I came back. And so and again, it's not perfect and not every company is perfect either. But looking back, as long as you plan it the right way, you've got a good team, you're very clear, and they're not a dependent team. We've got to be able to feel okay to take the leave. And if the company isn't a type of company that thinks that's a positive, you're in the wrong company. Like, honestly, because some companies are completely great and they're not all created equal. And so for women, I'm very big on the pick the right company, because the ones that are the right company are going to really support you. And also, if you set it up the right way and my team executed what I wanted them to in the few months I was gone, I got a promotion. Great. Like that's what's supposed to happen in these things.
Yeah, definitely. Because as you said, that time never comes back.
Yeah.
And one thing that I can even tell from my own personal experience is that kids don't remember toys. It's the experiences and the time spent with you.
Yes. Oh, for sure. For sure.
So as we talk about it, what are some of the things that women leaders tend to overcomplicate in comparison to men?
Yeah. So women, I observe, tend to they operate more in a checklist mindset, meaning I need to do this, see this, show this, quantify this, it's a checklist. Whereas men don't operate so much in a checklist, and they're more confident around, here's some of the experiences I've had, here's what I don't know, that's okay, and here's how I'm going to fill in the gaps. They operate more like that. Women are more, when I feel more confident in my little checklist piece of paper, I will go after bigger things. And it's a bizarre, really bizarre framing. I do think there's enough studies about that too. I mean, one study which says it's the age-old study, which is where do women feel comfortable applying versus men, the 80% versus 60%, that whole thing. But
yeah.
But this is broader than that. This is fully it's even as simple as raising your hand to try something hard, or taking on some big thing even though you don't know how to do it, or finding the right, not mentors, I think mentors are different, but sponsors who are going to put their name on a piece of paper and support them. Women go after those things far less. And so I do think that is something that holds women back.
Mm-hmm. And at the core of it is about giving yourself the permission.
Yes, it is. It is.
And when you give yourself permission, comes back again to fail. And that checklist is that fear of failure. Oh, what if I'm not good enough? Exactly. And it's important to allow yourself to fail, as you did. So as we are coming to the close of our insightful conversation, where you have shared some very powerful nuggets for our audience, what would you say are top 3 things that, whether it is women, parent leaders, emerging executives, or C-suite, anyone, regardless where they're in their stage, could do to become a leader, an effective transformational leader?
Yeah, I think one that we didn't talk about is don't take it all so seriously. What do I mean by that? It just means when I was younger, I used to be so in my head about, oh, I said this in this meeting and this person's face was funny. And I created all of these stories around things surrounding when I didn't think I did that well. Just, you got to get out of your own head and differentiate the difference between stories you tell yourself and facts that are actually true. And facts are facts. They're not like made up things that you think are true. They're things like the sky is blue and my shirt is white. Like those are facts. And so I always see that with people. The second thing, and I talked about it in the context of what is your role when you're dealing with your manager but I'd say it another way. Managing your manager is one of the most important things that you need to do. It is not just you manage people, you also manage your manager. And you got to figure out how you reduce their ambiguity, because if you don't, they're not going to see you as a leader. They're going to see you as someone who just increases the complexity of their day. And then the third thing I would say is the single biggest thing that differentiates people that I see is curiosity. And you've got to be super curious. And so I can always tell, this is going to be a tell for people if they interview on my team. If I ask someone, the easiest way for me to tell how curious someone is what's your favorite AI hack these days? If they don't know, then they're not that curious. It's the simplest way to say, and yes, I ask an AI question because it's the easiest and it's what's surrounding our world, but it could be everything. Like finance people who don't understand how the product is made, or engineers who don't understand the go-to-market strategy, even if it's basic sense, really cannot elevate. And so it's really being super curious around those things. That's how people get to bigger leadership positions.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Where can people find you? Where they can connect?
Yes. So best source is my Substack. I share a lot of these learnings and observations, leadwithkelly.substack.com. And then I also have a website, kellymcginnis.com, where I'm sharing other things and connection points there.
Fantastic. Is there anything on your mind or in your heart that you'd like to share?
Just that I'm super positive on the workers and the Gen Z and the millennials that are coming up. This is, if there's ever time to be coming into the corporate world and thinking about things, it's now. So just lean into it and take it by force.
Well, thank you for joining us, Kelly. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation and wish you all the best in your next chapter. And thank you, wonderful audience, for joining us, because without you, the show would not be possible. Reach out to us. Let us know, like you always do. I love that. And thank you for that, as to how we can serve and support you. And thank you, Juan, a tech genius, for making the show technically possible. Be well, take care, and go be that leader that I know you can be. Until next time, take care.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who have experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week.